Hello, everybody. We are Irasema, Mora, Pablo, and Douglas Goodwin, and today we will present this work titled Identity Construction, Reflections of Novice Teachers in a Teacher Education Program. We are two researchers, one based in Mexico and the other in the US. And for years, we have conducted research in the area of teacher identity and teaching development. And over the years, we have witnessed how novice teachers develop their professional identity. So today, we will present the following. We're going to present this work that we've been doing for the last years. And we will start by addressing the main concepts we are using to discuss our data. Then we will briefly talk about our motivation, why we wanted to do this research. After that, we will present the context and our methodology. We will continue with our findings, discussion, and we will end up with our final reflections. Now, Dr. Goodwin will explain our main concepts used.
Hi, folks. Good to see everybody. Give a quick little rundown here of the background of our presentation, our research. We're focusing on how important it is that we look at language teaching from the point of view of the teacher's perspective. So it is necessary here to obtain descriptive accounts from our research subjects and how they arrive at what they know and how they apply it in their classroom and make sense of and reconfigure their own practices over time. In our process here, the teacher that learning goes beyond the acquisition of new knowledge and skills, and it entails the creation and adoption of a new identity. Johnson acknowledges that teacher learning is a complex, dynamic, and contextually situated social activity. Okay, it's comprised of theoretical and practical knowledge and beliefs, agency, etc. You know, as you can see in the bold lettering there, it's a complex, dynamic system. Each of us as individuals, we come from a different social background, from a different context. We bring that with us into our studies, into our professional practice. It molds who we are, and what we learn, any new knowledge is brought through that system of acquired and accumulated experience, and it helps us form our identities. Now, with the outbreak of COVID, we wanted to research how the student teachers that were in a BA TESOL program in central Mexico were dealing with these very struggles in this dynamic system. You know, as undergrad students, they were also in-service teachers, many of them in primary and secondary levels. So they had the best and worst of both worlds, where they were students and teachers thrown into the middle of a pandemic where they had to teach in emergency remote teaching, some with little to no experience teaching online. So the need for emergency remote teaching. It's being defined here by Hodges, 2020, as a temporary shift of the instructional delivery to an alternate delivery mode due to a crisis circumstances. So that's us all over the world. Distinguishing ERT from your traditional online instruction is that the more traditional online instruction is actually planned, and typically it is delivered by instructors who have prepared for it and hopefully in many cases have been trained to teach in online modalities. Whereas in ERT, not everybody was prepared, and a lot of people were not trained, but they were sort of just thrown in the deep end of the pool to swim, sink or swim, and teach to the best of their ability. In Mexico, there are currently about 50 language teaching education programs, and most of them started in the 90s, or I should say the initial one started in the 90s. And the approach that they were using in general terms was more of the applied science model. However, as Lemus Hidalgo stated in 2017, she advocated for the inclusion of more teaching practice in language teacher education programs, which would suggest that maybe there wasn't a whole lot of teaching practice happening, but it was more of just students hearing and learning knowledge from a traditional classroom setting without much opportunity to apply it in their own professional contexts. So by incorporating more practicum, we are showing an interconnectedness between these strands. You can see in the graphic there on the right. Most of the programs running in Mexico, and I dare say across the world, use these strands or something similar. And what the graphic there is showing is how the knowledge, the categories of knowledge that are supported by the strands, how it's an ongoing looping thing where, for example, learning or developing English skills, okay, applying that knowledge to the students in their classroom gives them an opportunity to reflect and improve, the next time they teach this, not a far cry from action research. But if you look at the graphic there and you see all the different strands and all of the categories of knowledge they support, I think you'll start to identify some things in your own teaching. So in developing professional identity, there were some challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mugford and colleagues in 2015, they distinguished the person from the self as a person's sense of her or his self as based on external views and social practices. When the self and the person are combined, the result is the identity. So, citing our context-specific considerations that our participants, for example, are mostly in-service teachers, for our research, we define novice teachers, which is not an easy thing to agree on across the board in our profession, but we define them as those teachers who have less than 3 years of instructing experience and at the moment of study have undertaken their first job as an English teacher while simultaneously studying for a BA in TESOL. Okay. And another one of the challenges is, in the case of institutional pressure that our participant student teachers face in their professional worlds, the reality is essentially a multiple layered phenomenon. Imagine the students in our BA programs, the pressures they have to be successful as students, but also as professional teachers in their own schools, the pressures that they have placed upon them as employees. Okay, not to mention in their personal context as, friends and family, fathers and wives and daughters and sons, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of stuff at play here. Dr. Mora will now discuss a few slides.
About our methodology, this is a qualitative study that adopted a case study method. We aim to look at how the implementation of emergency remote teaching affected the teaching identity formation of 10 students in the BA program of a public university. Our objective was to examine the transitions in identity development of the participants during the quarantine. It should be noted that in this research, we had no interest in the pandemic per se, but rather in the internal struggle of the research participants' professional identity as they struggle to implement emergency remote teaching without any previous experience. As such, the pandemic created a space that amplified opportunity to look at this specific group's professional identity development in a unique context. This study was conducted in a public university in central Mexico. The participants of this study belonged to a cohort in semester 6 of the program, and they were taking a class called Analysis of English Language Teaching Practice, where the main objective is to analyze who they are as teachers and how they construct their professional identity as English teachers. All participants started teaching English while being enrolled in the BA. Therefore, they were novice teachers. Their average number of years teaching was between 1 and 3 years, and their ages ranged from 21 to 20 years old. And to respect their preferences, we use pseudonyms to refer to participants in this presentation. We collected data for a period of 8 months while they were taking the class and after they had finished the semester. This period of time encompassed reflective activities, including journals, the creation of a teaching map, a poster of their main qualities as teachers, forum discussions, and a description of themselves as teachers, and also semi-structured interviews that were conducted via Zoom with each participant after they had finished the semester. The initial analysis of these activities was done using semi-directed qualitative content analysis. So for this research, we had two major research questions. The first one, how were the novice teachers' identities challenged while adapting to emergency remote teaching? And number two, what feelings and emotions were related to student teachers' experiences with emergency remote teaching, both as students and teachers in their individual contexts? We will discuss the following emerging themes. The first, developing professional identity, the critical back and forth between the past and present self, and the pandemic and emergency remote teaching, self-reflections from experience. So for our first theme, one of the main activities of the course was to create a teaching map. This consisted of first identifying key people, moments, places, or any other element that student teachers consider influential in the decision-making process of becoming English teachers. Second, they had to add a page where they explain this teaching map from a retrospective perspective and reflect on how these elements make them the teachers they are now. The overall response to the teaching map was positive, as participants commented different stages in their lives and people that they consider influential in their decision to become teachers, as we can see in the first extract by Linda, where she acknowledged that she learned to identify key moments. And as she says that now I am very proud of myself and I am very proud of that I am here in the BA. Participants also, for example, were able to make connections between her current teaching practice and how, as in the case of Ruth, her mother was a pivotal influential figure in her development of professional identity. Another factor that emerged as crucial when shaping professional identity was age, not only by the participants, but also by their employers. For example, Alice, who was 21 years old at the moment of this research, considered that her boss has a particular view of her because of age. She says, my boss has this idea about me that I am very young, and I think she thinks that because I am young, I don't feel pressure, or I don't feel stress, or I don't punish kids. So apparently, in the eyes of her boss, Alice's young age was a synonym with being more relaxed, with no problems, adapting to new challenges. The image of being young became a concern to participants. They felt that age was a factor for which their pedagogical practices were being questioned. Now, about our next theme, which is COVID-19 and emergency remote teaching, self-reflections from the experience, we can say that the learning pertaining to student teachers' challenges when teaching with emergency remote teaching was also linked closely to the learning while studying at the BA. Participants reflected on how this situation affected their teaching practice, but also their life as student teachers in the BA program. Participants were having their first teaching experience, and they all went from being in face-to-face classes to emergency remote teaching overnight. Changes in action and confidence were recurring comments. Before the pandemic, they regarded themselves as novice teachers, but with confidence in what they were doing. However, during emergency remote teaching, confidence in their own expertise and competence lowered, as reported by Alice. As she says here, before the pandemic, I was confident I could deal with any discipline problem, but with the pandemic, I lost that confidence in me. Another incident revealed the heavy load participants were feeling during the pandemic after being with emergency remote teaching for a few months, as in the case of Nelly. Her confidence was put into question, but at the same time, she became more reflective. And she recalls this particular moment when she was in a class, and she says no one was answering and everybody had their cameras off. And then she started crying and she was asking herself, what is happening? And then she says, my reflection was that in my real life, the things that were happening in online classes would emotionally affect me directly. My reflections were deeper on myself, like what can I improve? What can I do? Now, Dr. Goodwin will explain more extracts.
From some of the reflection that our BA students offered us, you can look at these two quotes here. I don't need to read them all for you, but the sense we got is that they were identifying and relating to their teachers. There was a certain level of empathy. Themselves as teachers were able to see how their teachers might have been dealing with things. And it became a sort of a leveling up and a mutual understanding and appreciation for what everyone was doing, all the way BA teachers to their BA students, the BA students to their teachers and to their students. So I believe it was ended up being a benefit for all. In our discussion, we see where our participants were novice teachers who were facing their first teaching experience while doing their BA program. And they were in the process of understanding who they were as teachers, but also learning how to teach. I mean, the pandemic, let's be honest, it changed us all, some for better, some for worse, but our identities were constantly being challenged and evolving, and our BA students were no exception. Our findings reflect that by the time of the study, participants look at emergency remote teaching retrospectively, and they initially perceived themselves as unqualified, stressed, or insecure, which led to emotional tensions. But later, they took a proactive approach and they became to terms with it, and they started to develop a skill set for doing it. At the beginning, they seemed to lack confidence and the ability to think for themselves and to use their knowledge in new ways. They had to maximize the content knowledge and professional practice to overcome the challenges they were facing. I would encourage some of these people, if they haven't already, to seek ways to present what they have innovated and created. Even if they think they haven't done something special, they should get it on paper. They should publish it, present it, because I think there's some good stuff out there that we still have not heard about.
Now, technology helped these participants to cope with the new demands of the circumstances. However, at the beginning, they seemed to lack confidence and the ability to think for themselves and to use their knowledge in new ways. They had to maximize the content knowledge and professional practice to overcome the challenges they were facing. Taken together, we try to design a model of emerging conceptualizations of factors reshaping student-teacher's identity, and this is presented in the following figure. The arrows indicate a relative direct relationship, whereas the dotted lines indicate the transit constructions happening in specific moments. During the teacher education program, the participants' initial teaching experience, and all of them during COVID-19 and emergency remote teaching. This showed a deconstruction of their own perceptions of self and teaching practices, which were originally constructed by past experiences and knowledge. As it has been reported in literature, teachers have first to discover who they are as language teachers, their identity, and then be prepared for the renewal. This implies the constant construction and deconstruction of teachers who are able to practice what they theorize and theorize what they practice. And now we move on to the conclusions.
So here are conclusions. Just to kind of summarize, we saw where our participants were sort of mirroring their instructors. For me, the big one is that second bullet point, that not enough is being done right now in our teacher education programs to assess the identity and the social nature of our students and would-be professionalized teachers. We need to do more to develop and look at that our student teachers' social emotional competencies. Okay. It's a major component in every individual and who they are and how they treat other people. And I think our programs need to put more focus on those aspects. And another really important thing here is the third one. We can't assume that our study can directly apply to any other context. That would just be arrogant, and we are not. So I would encourage people who teach in other contexts to look at our study, consider it, compare it to their own context, and if they feel like they can replicate the study and see if there are any similarities. I'd love to hear that feedback. And teacher education programs had an opportunity to analyze and make substantial changes to strengthen their teacher education curriculum with technological knowledge, something that I think has been lacking in many programs, not only in Mexico, but across the world. Maybe a benefit from this pandemic and ERT is that everyone learned that they needed to be better with technology as far as training and investment. Here are references. You can also see them in the article that was published in the MXTSOL Journal. That's the second to last reference there. Mora, Pablo, and myself. Dr. Mora is a machine for these things, and it was an honor to do the research and write the article with her. And we'd both like to say thank you for joining us, and we are available here online for a little bit to take any questions you have. Hello to all of my colleagues in Mexico. Miss you all and look forward to one day collaborating again. All the best.